Bevendusha Programa Africa at a Glance, the show that gives you updates on stories across the continent, from Cape to Cairo, Lagos to Mombasa, politics, sports, arts and culture, humanitarian work and fashion. Now this week we look at protests from Zimbabwe, Mali, Zambia and Guinea. The man arrested for sleeping with girls for money, Sudan floods and who got crowned Miss Burundi. I'm Leseo Mukonane. Let's take a look at the story of the week. In a bid to prevent another blown-out epidemic, a massive emergency vaccination campaign has begun in Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola against the largest yellow fever outbreak in decades in a bid to stop it from spreading globally.
Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children and dozens of other groups are joining the DRC government and the World Health Organization in targeting about 10.5 million people over the next 10 days. They are focusing on the capital, Kinshasa, where only 2 million of the 10 million people have been fully vaccinated, and the region between Kinshasa and the border with Angola. The outbreak began in Angola's capital, Luanda, in February. Eventually, the new vaccination campaign aims to reach more than 14 million people in both countries. The campaign, however, is affected by the limited supplies, forcing the groups to use 1/5 of the standard dose, which will be effective only for a year. Save the Children has warned the outbreak could soon spread to America, Asia and Europe and elsewhere in Africa.
A young man was shot dead on Wednesday when security forces opened fire at a crowd protesting the government's alleged failure to protect civilians after a gruesome massacre in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Police and troops fired tear gas and warning shots to break up an angry protest in the town of Beni, where 51 civilians were hacked to death last weekend in the latest in a string of attacks blamed on rebels. An effigy of President Joseph Kabila was burnt on the town's main market, as were flags of Kabila's ruling People's Party for Reconstruction and Democracy. The protest caused further tension in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the United States has warned of more violence should Kabila hold on to power after his mandate expires in December. Security forces stepped in after hundreds gathered in the town's main street on the last day of the 3-day mourning period called by civil society groups over the gruesome murder of dozens of people over the weekend. The deadly protest came a day after DR Congo Prime Minister Augustin Matata was booed by hundreds of demonstrators outside Beni's town hall, where he gave a short speech after a 3-hour whistle-stop visit. The killings in and around Beni have been blamed by the government and the UN mission in the country on the rebel Allied Democratic Forces, a partly Islamist armed group of Ugandan origin. The group has been present in the Democratic Republic of Congo for more than 2 decades and is accused of a litany of human rights abuses.
Protests in Mali's capital against the arrest of a popular activist radio host have turned violent, leaving at least 3 people dead and several injured. These are the first major protests in Bamako since a military coup in 2012. Dozens took to the streets in Hamdalaye neighborhood on Wednesday in support of radio personality Ras Bath.
The demonstration was sparked by the arrest on Monday of Mohamed Yusuf Beteli, a government minister's son, also known as Ras Bath, whose polemical presence on local radio has raised the ire of the authorities. Supporters had gathered outside court to show their support, where the young presenter was due to appear in connection with the police investigation into whether he broke public morality rules. Ras Bath has accused President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta of being unable to manage the Malian army and attack the Prime Minister and several senior military figures in his show Carte sur table, meaning cards on the table. He comes from establishment stock himself as the son of Land Affairs Minister Mohamed Ali Beteli. but is now facing allegations of offending public decency over his broadcasts. Political tensions over the army are high following a massacre on July 19 of 17 soldiers at a military camp in Nampala, central Mali, which left dozens wounded. Betali had attacked top brass for what he said was poor leadership, making direct reference to the Nampala incident.
Still with protests, it was carnage on Harare streets once again. Zimbabwean police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse about 100 people protesting against central bank plans to reintroduce local banknotes.
The protesters set out to march through the streets of the capital, Harare, towards the central bank. Ironically, the protesters were carrying flowers in their hands. The protesters were stopped by riot police who broke up the demonstration. Zimbabwe abandoned its currency in 2009 following hyperinflation, adopting a multi-currency system dominated by the United States dollar. Zimbabweans fear the central bank's plan to introduce banknotes or bond notes in October could open the door to rampant money printing. This happened in 2008 when inflation hit 500 billion%, wiping out people's savings and pensions. President Robert Mugabe has responded to the recent protests by saying that people who are unhappy with living conditions can leave the country. The 92-year-old has been in power since 1980.
Zambian police have arrested about 150 people protesting against the re-election of President Edgar Lungu. Supporters of Zambia's opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema are unsatisfied with election results, accusing President Edgar Lungu's re-election as a fraud. The opposition party has filed for a court petition against President Lungu.
Zambian police have arrested 100 opposition activists over protests that erupted after President Edgar Lungu was declared the winner of a highly contested vote. Supporters of opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema took to the streets in southern province after the election results were released on Monday, blocking roads with logs and burning tires.
Actually, for this election, we are not happy as the youths for UPND. Because what is happening in Zambia, this is not the democracy which we had before from the first when we started the democracy.
Hichilema, who heads the United Party for National Development, rejected Thursday's poll as rigged, and the party said it would formally challenge the result. The 54-year-old self-made businessman hails from the south and enjoys widespread support in the region. He claimed there were signs of fraud and vote rigging over the 4 days it took to release the results. His supporters share the sentiments.
I'm against the ECZ decision to declare the President Edgar Lungu as a winner, because whatever is happening now in Zambia, I blame the commission in charge of elections. They announced someone who is not a winner, and the Zambian people are not happy because ECZ is against our rights. We voted for someone, our own chosen leader or candidate. Then they swapped the results and give President Edgar Lungu.
The poll results put Lungu narrowly ahead with 50.35% of the vote against 47.63% for Hichilema, a difference of about 100,000 votes. The outbreak of violence prompted Lungu to call for calm, telling supporters his swearing-in would be delayed due to the rejection of the results by the opposition. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Guinea's opposition protests in Conakry to demand that President Alpha Condé steps down has left one person dead. At least 500,000 Guineans joined the massive opposition rally to denounce alleged economic mismanagement and corruption by President Condé.
Police shot and killed a young man during a demonstration in Guinea that saw at least 500,000 people protest against alleged government corruption. Several others were injured in the Conakry rally to denounce what they said was economic mismanagement by the government of President Alpha Condé. Opposition leader Selo Delaine Diallo said 700,000 people had joined a 15-kilometer procession in the West African national's capital. Security forces say the number was only closer to 500,000.
It's time he goes because we want injustice to end in our country. Guinean justice is always incompetent when it comes to the opposition. The justice system needs to change.
Last year, Guinea's Constitutional Court formally confirmed Condé's re-election, dismissing opposition claims of vote rigging and fraud. It was only the second democratic presidential poll since Guinea gained independence from France in 1958. Rights campaigners have urged Condé to use his second term to intensify the fight against impunity, strengthen the judiciary and promote equal respect for the rights of all Guineans. According to the United Nations, the majority of Guinea's population lives in poverty and survives on less than $1 per day. This despite the country being rich in minerals. Bureau Report for ANN7.
With just days ahead of Gabon's presidential elections, opposition appears to have changed tactics. The parties have come together to select a single candidate to go against incumbent President Ali Bongo ahead of the country's presidential elections on the 27th of August.
An interesting twist in the race towards Gabon's presidential elections. Two opposition heavyweights are set to back former African Union chief John Ping in his bid to oust President Ali Bongo at the ballot box this month. Following a night of negotiations, Guy Ndoba Ndama, who served as a parliamentary speaker for 2 decades, and former Prime Minister Kazmi Oye Mba both withdrew from the August 27 presidential race. Over the weekend, thousands of Gabonese nationals reaffirmed their support for President Ali Bongo.
We are here to celebrate the launch of Ali Bongo's campaign, and we believe that everything will go well because he is the candidate of the future. We have confidence. We hope that a lot of things will change.
57-year-old Bongo won his first term in 2009 after the death of his father Omar Bongo, who ruled Gabon from 1967. Opposition activists had called for Bongo to be blocked from running, claiming that he was ineligible as a Nigerian who had been adopted by the former president. Last month, the Constitutional Court rejected an appeal against the eligibility of Bongo, who came to power in a disputed election following his father's death. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Africa at a Glance will take a short break. When we come back, we will look at a severely drought-hit community in Mozambique that has constructed a water reservoir in anticipation of coming rains. Stay tuned.